What are the Four Noble Truths? Four means four, noble means wondrous, miraculous, truth means reality. The Four Noble Truths are four wondrous, miraculous realities. Additionally, the Four Noble Truths are also called the Four Holy Truths, four true realities, or simply the Four Truths. These are the four truths that the Buddha discovered, experienced, and declared about the nature of human existence. The origins of the Four Noble Truths. After 49 days and nights of meditation under the Bodhi tree, Prince Siddhartha attained the supreme enlightenment and became the fully awakened one, known as the Buddha Shakyamuni. He realized the ultimate truth, penetrated the reality of the Dharma realm, and understood the four truths of the world, the Four Noble Truths. At that moment, his mind was deeply serene and pure, completely extinguishing all suffering, defilements, and afflictions. With boundless compassion, the Buddha wanted to teach and spread this fundamental truth to all beings, to lead them out of the cycle of birth and death. Thus, the Four Noble Truths were expounded in his first sermon, known as the Turning of the Dharma Wheel, in the Deer Park at Sarnath, where he taught the Dharma to the five ascetics led by Kondana. He guided the five ascetics to attain enlightenment and liberation. From this moment, the Sangha was established, marking the beginning of the widespread dissemination of the true Dharma. The Four Noble Truths. The Buddha himself stated that he only taught four things: suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Suffering refers to the miseries we experience in our lives. Origin is the cause of this suffering, our untrained, clinging mind. Cessation is the Buddha's promise that we can end suffering by eradicating desire. The path consists of 8 steps, the Noble Eightfold Path, we must follow to achieve this goal. Throughout 45 years of teaching, from his first sermon in the Deer Park until his passing, the Buddha explained these four truths hundreds of times. He wanted to ensure that these fundamental truths were thoroughly understood by many people in different circumstances and at various stages of spiritual development. Once, the Buddha taught that not accepting the miseries of life is a burden. We create suffering for ourselves by carrying this burden. We end suffering by putting the burden down. The path shows us how to lessen this burden for ourselves. The Buddha also taught that suffering is like a disease. Like a physician, he diagnosed the cause of the disease. The cessation of the disease is the Tathagata's remedy, and the path is the medicine he prescribed for us. The first noble truth, suffering. The first truth the Buddha taught us is that suffering is inevitable. You might wonder, does this teaching about suffering apply in today's modern world with so many inventions to make our lives more comfortable? In the Buddha's time, people surely suffered due to basic necessities, diseases, and natural disasters. Haven't modern technological advancements enabled us to do whatever we want, go wherever we desire, and produce any product we need? However, no matter how easy and safe our modern lives may seem, the truth about suffering remains unchanged. It exists now just as it did in the Buddha's time. People suffered in those days, and we suffer now as well. We might label the Buddha's first noble truth in various ways depending on the context. Suffering, stress, fear, anxiety, restlessness, depression, frustration, anger, jealousy, abandonment, neurosis, or pain. All sentient beings, regardless of where or when they live, can face these issues. We can fall ill at any moment. We may be separated from loved ones. We might lose what we have or be forced into situations we despise. Parents, children, spouses, siblings, neighbors, friends, communities, and nations all struggle and conflict over money, status, power, and boundaries. Some of these problems arise from greed, anger, and ignorance. All are related to external conditions such as social, political, economic, educational, and environmental factors, as well as our internal state. Recognizing that these issues are unavoidable causes our minds great suffering. The core of the Buddha's first noble truth is to recognize and accept suffering as it truly is, without blaming others. He taught that to begin progressing toward happiness, we must face suffering with a steadfast mind and stable emotions, without resentment or discouragement. We need to confront our problems directly. Any circumstance in life brings a certain level of suffering to those who have not fully attained enlightenment. This suffering can be subtle, perhaps just a latent unease, or it can be very clear, such as attachment to people, possessions, or views. It all depends on how deeply rooted our greed, anger, and ignorance are, as well as our individual character and past experiences. For example, two people might witness the same event but have entirely different reactions. One might feel calm and accepting, while the other might feel fearful and anxious. Both happiness and suffering are created by the mind. Our minds generate our life experiences and either accept or resist this creation. That is why the Buddha said we create heaven or hell right in this life. Until we achieve enlightenment, many circumstances will bring disappointment to us all. Consider just 3 issues: the nature of human existence, change, and the lack of control over our lives. Accepting suffering as an integral part of life, without assigning blame, helps us maintain a balanced perspective. By understanding that suffering is a universal experience and a natural part of the human condition, we can cultivate compassion and empathy for ourselves and others. This acceptance is the first step on the path to overcoming suffering and finding true happiness. The human condition, the inevitable cycle of human life, birth, aging, illness, and death, brings immense suffering. People are not born into this world with radiant smiles on their faces. But as we grow older, the initial cries become less audible. It can be said that they transform into silent cries that accompany us throughout our lives. We cry for countless liters of milk, tons of food, meters of fabric, square meters of land to build houses and schools, trees for making books and furniture, and medicine for various illnesses. We cry for people to love us and for ways to satisfy our needs. If we were not born into this unstable world, all this suffering would not exist. Each child born into the world seems to bring a share of misfortune. The aging process also brings suffering. We might not remember the difficulties of adapting to a new environment or a new teacher, but we can clearly recall the challenges of physical and psychological changes during puberty. As adults, we must adapt to new jobs, relationships, modern technology, strange diseases, and new social conditions. These changes often occur before we have fully adjusted to the existing ones. Such unpleasant transitions seem common at every life stage. In old age, adapting to changes becomes even more difficult. It is painful to lose health and physical strength. We know we cannot escape aging, yet we still wish it wouldn't come. Thus, we suffer. The Buddha taught that aging brings suffering. The Buddha was truly speaking about aging and decay in general. We know that every cell in our body is constantly deteriorating or dying, while new cells are being generated. Every mental state also disappears and is replaced by a new one. Gradually, this process of decay and renewal weakens our body and mind, ultimately leading to death. Illness is undoubtedly a source of suffering. Everyone knows how painful sickness can be. Illness actually brings 2 kinds of pain: the fear of the disease and the disease itself. Thus, illness is a constant source of anxiety, causing us to suffer when we are sick and to worry and fear when we are healthy. People often think that pain and suffering are synonymous, but they are not. While you cannot avoid the pain of illness or injury, you can avoid the suffering caused by it. When you lessen your excessive attachment to physical sensations, you will suffer less when they change. For example, when Devadatta threw a rock and injured the Buddha's foot, the Buddha felt the pain. But because he understood the nature of pain, he did not suffer as an ordinary person would. The sensation of pain can often be controlled, but suffering due to a particular state of being is deeper and harder to manage. The next suffering in human life is death, not just the moment before dying, but everything that leads to it. We all fear death and worry about when or how we will die. We also know that when we die, we have to leave everything behind. Can we bear that? When a loved one passes away, we feel shocked, pained, and a sense of loss for years, if not forever. But the suffering of human life does not end with death. The Buddha taught that death does not put an end to the cycle of suffering. Someone who has experienced much suffering might say, near death, I do not want to be reborn again. But merely wishing for this cannot end the cycle of rebirth. As long as we remain ignorant of the true nature of reality, life will continue from one existence to the next. As long as greed, hatred, and delusion persist in our minds, the endless cycle of rebirth, the rotation of past, present, and future lives will go on. In this cycle, the sufferings we have described will repeat endlessly. The energy of all these experiences is like a burden we carry on our backs from one life to the next through countless rebirths. In each new life, the internal baggage is transferred to a new container. When we die, we cannot take any material possessions with us. However, the bag containing that energy, the imprints of all our mental actions and all intentional words and deeds from this life and previous lives, not only follows us, but actually influences the new life. Until we can empty this bag, until we can destroy all the consequences we have created through greed, hatred, and delusion over countless lives, we cannot escape death and the cycle of rebirth. We can use this understanding to motivate ourselves to act in ways that lead to lasting happiness and liberation. We know that greed and hatred are powerful motivators for action, but what does the Buddha mean by delusion? Why does ignorance play such a crucial role in the suffering we endure? In Buddhist terms, ignorance, delusion has two meanings: not knowing, such as not understanding what the Buddha means by the Four Noble Truths, and misunderstanding, such as believing we understand how the world operates when we actually do not. Not understanding the truth of suffering, we think that getting a new job, a new house, or a new partner will bring us true happiness. Not knowing how the energy of our words and actions follows us from one life to the next, we allow greed, hatred, doubt, and jealousy to control us. Not knowing that a simple life, disciplined conduct, good friends, meditation, and mindful observation of the true nature of our experiences will bring happiness to us in this life and in many lives to come, we find countless excuses not to engage in these positive activities. We are often unaware even of our own ignorance. After a particularly profound sermon on the nature of reality, Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, said to him, "Blessed One, this teaching seems very deep, but to me it is clear as clear can be." The Buddha replied, No, do not say that. It does not just seem deep, it truly is deep." Due to ignorance, Ananda's understanding of the Buddha's teaching was not thorough, and thus he did not attain liberation at that moment. Like Ananda, ignorance causes us to drift through the endless cycle of suffering in samsara. Change also causes us suffering. No matter what we do, change separates us from what we love and brings us what we dislike. Death and separation take us away from our loved ones. Friends move away, lovers leave us. These separations cause us immense pain. Losing something we cherish makes us sad and frustrated. Even trivial things can cause us distress when they break or disappear. Once, when I was 4 years old, I sat in the sand and used my fingertip to draw a perfect circle around myself. I was so pleased with it. My sister, who was about 7, walked by and erased my circle with her foot. I was so furious that I chased her, picked up a small but heavy chair, and threw it at her. To this day, she has a scar on her toe. All that anger, all those tears and pain caused by something as trivial and fleeting as a circle in the sand. It's not just about losing what we love. We constantly face people or situations we don't want, at least not here, not now. Having to live or work day in and day out with people we dislike creates a lot of suffering. Even things we can't control, like the weather, can make us frustrated. At the Bhavana Society in West Virginia, where I teach, people complain when it's hot and humid, but they also complain when it's cold and rainy. When it's hot, they complain about their skin and sinuses being affected. When it's cold, they worry about slipping on the ice. And when the weather is perfect, they complain about not having time to enjoy it. Looking around, it's clear that everything in existence creates suffering. Why is that? In reality, everything in the world exists as a result of some cause. Changes in air pressure, wind, and temperature cause rain. A tree grows from a seed because of the sunlight, soil, and water that nourish it. Similarly, our existence is the product of various causes and conditions. The direct physical cause of our parents' union, and the causes of the deep impressions we've accumulated over many past lives. The Buddha called these and all other things arising from causes conditioned phenomena, sankhara. He explained that all conditioned phenomena have 3 characteristics. First, they are impermanent. Over time, everything, mountains, insects, plants, machinery, deteriorates, changes, or dies. Second, because of these changes, all conditioned phenomena are inherently suffering. As we have seen, any change can cause suffering. Third, all conditioned phenomena are non-self. This last characteristic is the hardest to grasp, so let's set it aside for now. Impermanence is not difficult to understand. The issue is not the truth that all things are transient. Rather, it is our attachment to people or things, like my circle in the sand, that causes us suffering. For example, we might have just bought a coat we really like. After wearing it only a few times, it gets stained, torn, or forgotten somewhere, and we feel upset. Of course, a torn or lost coat is not a major tragedy. We can easily buy another. But what if it was a gift from a loved one? What if we bought it to commemorate a special birthday, holiday, or trip? In that case, we cherish it, and when it is lost or ruined, we feel deep sorrow. Talking about these things can sometimes make listeners uncomfortable. What about happiness, they ask? Why not talk about that? Why don't we discuss joy, happiness, and pleasure instead of suffering? The answer, my friend, lies in change. Because of impermanence, anything pleasant, happy, or joyful cannot last long. As mature, intelligent adults, we must dare to talk about what truly happens without feeling distressed. We must face the suffering caused by impermanence and accept it. Why hide it and pretend everything is rosy? By facing impermanence directly, we can see that it also has positive aspects. We can be certain that whatever situation currently exists in our lives will also change. It might get worse, but it could also get better. Because of impermanence, we have the opportunity to learn, grow, mature, teach, remember, and create other positive changes, including practicing Buddhism. If all things were immutable, no transformation could occur. The uneducated would remain uneducated. The poor would stay poor. We would have no chance to eradicate greed, anger, ignorance, and their negative consequences. So we understand impermanence and the suffering it causes. But what about non-self? How is it related to impermanence? The Buddha taught that all things in the world are non-self, or without a true self, because they are always changing. We and everything around us are not solid and unchanging. We cannot label anything in this world as I or mine because everything changes too quickly. With our bodies, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness, and intentions constantly shifting, how can we point to anything and say, this is mine, or this is me? Even the thought or belief, this is me, changes quickly. For practical purposes, we might say, I am here, or this is mine. But we must say these words with a clear mind, without being misled into thinking they indicate the existence of an unchanging self or mine. Material objects also change continuously. We might use conventional names and say this is a chair or this is a monkey, but these names are hard to reconcile with the ever-changing reality as we know it. More accurately, we and all phenomena are part of a process, a continuous flow of growth and decay, formation and dissolution. Nothing in this world or within ourselves is different or permanent. Observe your mind for a minute, and you will understand what I mean. Memories, emotions, thoughts, and feelings pass through the screen of consciousness so quickly that it is hard to keep up with them. Therefore, it is futile for the mind to cling to or push away these fleeting shadows. When our mindful awareness becomes sharp, as in a deep meditative state, we can see the nature of impermanence very clearly. So clearly that there is no longer any belief in a self. Some people feel pessimistic or frustrated when they hear about the theory of non-self. Some even get angry. They mistakenly conclude that this means life has no meaning. They do not understand that a life without the notion of self is the most pleasant and meaningful life. Once, I gave a manuscript to a friend who was a professional editor. I expected him to finish the work in an hour. Yet, 6 months passed without any news. Finally, he came to visit, and we took a walk together. When he did not mention my manuscript, I sensed it was a delicate subject. Cautiously, I asked, "Have you had a chance to look at my manuscript?" He remained silent for a long time, and then replied, "Venerable, I did look at it. When I got to the part about the theory of non-self, I became so upset that I threw the manuscript away." I was surprised but not angry with him. Instead, I let go of my attachment to the manuscript. He had discarded my work because of non-self, so I also discarded the self related to the manuscript. I was able to maintain a friendly, gentle, and gracious attitude. However, my friend became cold, closed off, and miserable due to his attachment to the self. Thus, you might also find it difficult to accept the concept of non-self. Yet, as long as you maintain the notion of self, Your life will be uncomfortable, stubborn, and closed off, while those around you will find you egotistical and unpleasant. You might easily get upset or angry when someone disagrees with or criticizes you, when things do not go your way, or even when people offer constructive feedback. Understanding the true meaning of non-self, you will feel more open and relaxed. You will find it easier to get along with everyone, even those from different nationalities, because you will not feel more or less important than others. You will adapt to any situation more easily, and people will feel comfortable around you. With a genuine understanding of non-self, you can feel happy and at ease regardless of where you are or whether you are treated kindly. Do not let the notion of non-self make you pessimistic or upset. For now, let's accept this concept as an intellectual understanding. However, with persistent practice of mindfulness, one day you will directly perceive the non-self nature, the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena. At that moment, you will forever end the suffering caused by impermanence. The Buddha and other enlightened masters have achieved complete enlightenment, proving this truth. The Buddha was completely free from the notion of self, yet he continued to live in society after his enlightenment. For the sake of common conventions and ease of communication, he continued to use familiar terms like I or mine. You can do the same. The name on your driver's license might not be an absolutely correct identifier guaranteeing a fixed identity, but it is a useful convention according to societal norms. However, when mindfulness helps you realize that the self you have fiercely defended is actually just an illusion, a continuous flow of changing sensations, feelings, and physical states without any fixed or permanent entity, then there will no longer be a you to cling to the impermanent things of this world. Consequently, there will be no reason for you to feel sorrow or suffering. Lack of control. If we could truly control our lives, we would have no reason to suffer. But we don't have that power. On the contrary, we often don't get what we want, and instead get what we don't want. We desire a suitable job, a comfortable office, a kind boss, and a high salary that lasts forever. But these things change, and we cannot predict when or why. We want our loved ones to stay with us forever, but no matter how tightly we hold on to them, one day we will have to part. To stay healthy, we take supplements, exercise, and eat well, but we still get sick. We want to stay young and healthy, believing that aging only happens to others, but time passes and we discover that our bodies are no longer the same. Whatever ideal circumstances we have, we naturally want to keep them forever. But we have no control over the law of impermanence. Everything in existence follows this law, and there's nothing we can do about it. Sometimes unexpected events happen that cause us distress. For example, getting stung by a bee, a TV show you were looking forward to being canceled, your car getting stolen, losing your job, a loved one being diagnosed with cancer, losing cherished photos in a fire, your child getting into a car accident or becoming involved with drugs, scandals, blame, shame, failure, poverty, loss of property, loss of love, a deteriorating body. So many unfortunate, unwanted things happen to us and to those we care about, but we can't do anything to stop them. You might say, that's enough. But I still want to add a few more points. If we look closely, we can see that even when our desires are fulfilled, they still bring suffering. For instance, you want a beautiful house, so you buy it, but then you experience numerous troubles. You have to pay the mortgage, taxes, maintain it, insure it, and keep it in good condition. But you don't spend much time at home. You leave early for work, and in the evenings, you might go out for parties or movies, returning home only to sleep for 5 or 6 hours before leaving again. Surely your house is large and beautiful. But you have to keep paying off debts, mowing the lawn, repairing the roof, and cleaning the garage. You got what you wanted, but are you happy? Take another example. A young man likes a girl, and she likes him. They both try to attract each other, but from the start of the relationship, they live in fear. The young man fears that his girlfriend might fall for someone more handsome, and the girl fears another woman might take him away. They are filled with jealousy, doubt, and worry. Is that happiness? There are countless other examples. Just open a newspaper. Read about someone lucky enough to win the lottery, only to live a miserable life afterward. That's why people say there are only two tragedies in life: not getting what you want and getting what you want. a realistic view. The Buddha endeavored to make it clear to us that all conditioned phenomena, sankharas, bring suffering to those who have not attained enlightenment. He listed the 5 aggregates present in every aspect of reality: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Form refers to all physical phenomena, including the body and everything we perceive through our senses. The other 4 aggregates pertain to the mind. At the end of his enumeration of all things that bring suffering, the Buddha said, in short, clinging to the 5 aggregates is suffering. What does this mean? Why does suffering pervade every aspect of life? According to the Buddha's teachings, whether we experience suffering or not depends on how we perceive and think about things. This process is very subtle. Everyone knows that they perceive the world through their senses. We commonly speak of the 5 senses, through which we hear, see, smell, taste, and touch. The Buddha also mentioned a 6th sense, the mind, which perceives thoughts, ideas, mental images, and emotions. What our senses actually receive are raw data of experience, or in the case of the mind, mental impressions of experience: colors, shapes, sizes, texture, hardness, roughness, or smoothness. Naturally, we know that each person has different perceptions depending on their state of mind and sensory faculties. For instance, a person with a cold may not smell or taste well. Someone with hearing impairment may not hear low-pitched sounds. Thus, perception is subjective and depends on the perceiver's faculties. We are aware of these differences, but the mind still deceives us. It makes us believe that our perceptions are accurate and reliable. It leads us to attribute the characteristics we perceive inherently to the object we are observing, rather than to the result of the confluence of various conditions, including our own senses. But there's more. After perceiving something, our mind immediately categorizes or judges it, placing the object or experience into one of 3 boxes. The first box is labeled as pleasant sensations, such as the aroma of freshly baked bread, a symphony, or a brilliant sunset. The second box contains unpleasant sensations, like the memory of a father's death, a headache, or the sound of a police siren. The third box holds neutral sensations, all phenomena and experiences to which we react indifferently. Naturally, our mind, which has not yet been completely freed from attachment, clings tightly to pleasant things. Due to aversion, it pushes away unpleasant things. Because of ignorance, avijja, it ignores neutral things. And we mistakenly regard all phenomena, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, as permanent, as having a self or soul, and as having the capacity to bring us lasting happiness or to cause us perpetual suffering. The Buddha explained the impact of erroneous or biased perception as follows. Dependent on the eye and forms, eye consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. What one feels that one perceives. What one perceives that one thinks about. What one thinks about that one mentally proliferates. With what one has mentally proliferated as the source, perceptions and notions tinged by mental proliferation beset a man with respect to past, future, and present forms cognizable through the eye. In contrast, with a realistic and genuine perception, there is no clinging or aversion. It will accept impermanence and either suffering, dukkha, and non-self anatta as they truly are. When we perceive the world with a wholesome view, we cultivate positive intentions. A realistic view is the best remedy. If we can see phenomena, things and people as they really are, with the characteristics of impermanence, suffering, and non-self, then no perception can cause us suffering. A realistic view is the aim of mindful meditation. Reality means not avoiding the unpleasant aspects of oneself and the world. Through mindful awareness, we practice seeing existence realistically, which means recognizing that it is not always pleasant, easy, or happy. Life is a mixture of suffering and joy. We note the physical or mental suffering as soon as it arises and observe how it develops. We also observe how long the state lasts and how it eventually fades away. Mindful meditation functions like a shock absorber in a car. If you are accustomed to dealing with the disappointments and sufferings of daily life, and understand that these events occur naturally, when a difficult or painful situation arises, you will face it with courage and composure. When you can look directly at suffering without flinching, you can also recognize true happiness. The second noble truth, the origin of suffering. The second noble truth, as taught by the Buddha, reveals that the origin of suffering is craving, which can also be termed as attachment, clinging, or desire. It doesn't matter what the object is, a delicious meal, a close friend, or a lofty spiritual goal. If you cling to it, you will experience disappointment and suffering. You might ask, where does craving come from? The most obvious source is instinct, the desire to survive, the craving for food, clothing, shelter, warmth, abundance, and satisfaction. This desire seems to be hardwired into humans as well as animals. Even plants seem to have some desire, as they always turn towards the sun for light and warmth. Another source of craving is social conditioning. All the views and values we learn from our parents, family, friends, schools, advertisements, and books, which condition us to believe that some things are good and others are bad. The strongest desires are based on pleasurable sensations. Life offers us many pleasures through each of our senses. For example, sight. Your eyes are pleasing and delightful. Visual consciousness is also pleasing and delightful, as are the eye faculty, visual objects, the sensation of seeing, the recognition of images, the craving for visual objects, imagined images, intentional thoughts, and so on. Similarly, the ears, nose, body, and mind also bring about pleasurable sensations. These sensory pleasures are powerful and compelling. The allure of beautiful sights, melodious sounds, pleasant fragrances, delightful tastes, and tactile sensations can create strong attachments. We chase after these experiences, believing they will bring us happiness. However, the Buddha taught that this very craving, this clinging to sensory experiences, is the root cause of our suffering. Every day, we have opportunities to enjoy pleasurable and delightful objects through our senses. Yet, we still are not truly happy. In this second noble truth, the Buddha advises us to recognize that clinging to sensual pleasures is highly detrimental to our happiness. He compared sensual pleasure to a bare bone thrown to a hungry dog. No matter how long the dog chews on it, the bone can never satisfy its hunger. Reflecting on this, we can see ourselves in a similar situation. No matter how many sensual pleasures we indulge in, we remain unsatisfied, always wanting more. How many cakes or sweets are enough? How many online games do you need to play? How many novels do you need to read to satiate your desire for enjoyment? How much sexual activity is needed to quench your sexual cravings? How much alcohol or drugs? Sometimes people stay up all night indulging in pleasures until they collapse. Have they had enough? Or is there always another thrill they haven't yet tasted? The Buddha compared sensual pleasure to a razor smeared with honey. To taste the honey, we might endure great pain. There are countless stories of people harming themselves, sometimes fatally, in the pursuit of pleasure. A few years ago, a news story told of a worker repairing a roof who, looking down through a skylight, saw a naked woman walking in her house. Trying to get a better view, he leaned over the skylight, slipped, and fell off the roof, sustaining severe injuries. Alcohol, drugs, adventurous travels, dangerous sports, not to mention reckless sexual behavior, have caused many to suffer. Furthermore, we cannot prolong sensual pleasure. Like a dream, it quickly fades away. It slips out of our grasp, leaving us with nothing but feelings and memories. Like borrowed items, we cannot keep them for long. Therefore, the more you indulge in any form of sensual pleasure, the more harm it brings you when time, change, or unavoidable circumstances take it away. Craving arises from sensations of pleasure and pain. When we experience pleasure, we develop a desire to hold on to and maintain it. When we are troubled or in pain, we desire to push away or escape from it. Because of our attachment to pleasurable feelings and our aversion to painful feelings, we constantly seek experiences that bring pleasure or avoid suffering. Once we find something that seems to fulfill this purpose, we become biased and discriminatory. This state of mind leads us to cling tightly. To protect and preserve what we have, people are willing to lie, harm, insult others, or even use weapons to defend what they believe is their possession. Desire also leads to psychological torment. As feelings arise from contact with what brings pleasure, through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, people start to think and reason, hypothesize, philosophize, speculate, and imagine. They become attached to false views and misguided beliefs. Reflecting on past pleasures, they create thoughts, beliefs, and theories full of desire. Some people become so immersed in desire that they vow to be reborn to enjoy all those pleasures again. Others, on the contrary, due to the painful experiences they have gone through, do not wish to be reborn. That's enough, they say. One lifetime is enough. I don't want any of this anymore. In summary, desire arises from ignorance, not knowing that nothing is permanent and not knowing that desire leads to suffering. When the senses come into contact with pleasant objects, the deluded mind generates a desire to grasp and hold on to them. The opposite is also true. When the senses encounter something unpleasant, the deluded mind generates a desire to flee or avoid it. Because of this intention, people engage in unwholesome actions through body, speech, and mind, regardless of the consequences. Due to desire, people distort the truth and evade personal responsibility for their actions. Taking responsibility for your actions. The Buddha's teachings on karma make it clear that accepting responsibility for our actions is the foundation for individual freedom and completeness. Refusing to acknowledge our shortcomings and blaming the world for our unhappiness will only immerse us in suffering. Everyone experiences dissatisfaction, but when you blame your parents or society for your problems, you give yourself a reason not to change. The moment you take responsibility for your circumstances, even if others contributed to them, you begin to move toward a more positive path. In my opinion, we distort the truth and avoid personal responsibility in at least 3 ways. First, we believe the external world brings us suffering. As a result, we direct all our efforts and mental capacities outward. We exert tremendous effort, sometimes becoming blind in our attempt to change those around us, as if their perfection would bring us liberation. Or we strive to change society, thinking that eradicating social evils will solve our personal problems. When poverty, war, and environmental pollution are eliminated, then I will be happy. Of course, the desire to improve society is commendable. Seeing the suffering of others, we empathize and act to alleviate their pain. However, we often fail to realize that in our efforts to solve others' problems, we neglect or suppress our own. Our rationale might be, there are too many social ills to fix, so we have no time to address our own issues. In reality, we lack honesty and courage to examine our true motivations. Those involved in social activism can be compassionate and service-oriented, but some may not recognize their true purpose. Helping those in greater need than ourselves can give us a sense of power we don't have over those who aren't dependent on us. The desire for power is a basic instinct. It requires great honesty to see how much of what we do for others stems from this motive. Recognizing the true intent behind our actions can help us focus on the most important task of setting our own house in order before trying to save others. The second reason we avoid taking responsibility for our actions is by insisting that we have no problems. We only care about our own happiness and goals without considering how our actions might affect others. Subconsciously, we might think that the external world is unimportant or unreal. If we could listen to our own thoughts, we might hear ourselves saying, "Only I exist, and only what I care about is important. Nothing else matters." We are likely familiar with individuals who claim to value certain principles, but act in ways that contradict those values. These people are primarily concerned with themselves. Some might openly admit that they are driven by the desire for financial success, power, or fame. However, they also find ways to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. They deceive themselves by believing that their personal goals are more important than anything else. They further delude themselves by thinking that achieving their goals will bring happiness, regardless of who gets hurt along the way. The third way we avoid personal problems is simply by running away from them. We all do this to some extent. Watching TV or rummaging through the fridge for food are common ways to avoid honestly looking at ourselves. You lull your body and mind with comfort and ease, then drift off to sleep. Time passes. Except for getting older and gaining weight, nothing changes for you. The challenge here is to have the courage to ask why. We have all used these methods to evade responsibility, finding temporary comfort and fleeting happiness. But none of these provide a lasting, true solution to our problems. Whether we try to change the world, ignore the world, or separate ourselves from the world, we cannot escape the ultimate responsibility for our actions. Life has its ups and downs, and we are the creators of them. This very tool we possess, the combination of body and mind, endures countless difficulties. The only thing we can do, according to the Buddhist teachings, is to find ways to improve the one instrument that has the power to bring happiness to ourselves and the world. That instrument is our mind. The third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. The third noble truth is the Buddha's promise that suffering can be eradicated. This cessation arises from the complete abandonment of all clinging and craving. Now that we have begun to understand the cause and effect of our actions and accept responsibility for our words, actions, and thoughts, we can see that we play a crucial role in ending our own suffering. However, at this stage, it is difficult to fully grasp what complete happiness feels like. What would life be like without anger or desire? The disciples of the Buddha also had such questions. Once, Shariputra, one of the Buddha's two chief disciples and an enlightened teacher himself, was having a discussion with a group of monks. They asked, "Venerable Sir, the perfect state of happiness that the Buddha calls nirvana is not a kind of happiness based on personal experience. How can something that is not experienced be called happiness?" Shariputra replied, "That is why it is called happiness." In other words, happiness consists of what is not experienced. The third noble truth teaches that happiness eradicates all negative mental states, all greed, hatred, and delusion. Ultimately, when we have succeeded in extinguishing the inner fires that consume the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, we will then experience complete and absolute purity of happiness. It may be difficult to imagine what that state feels like, but the only way to discover it for oneself is to follow the path that leads to that goal. Like most of us, the monks consulting with Shariputra wanted to know from the beginning what the end of the path would be like. This is similar to asking a little girl, "How does it feel to give birth to a baby?" The little girl has never given birth. She must grow up and mature to have that experience. She can speak a little about childbirth from what she has read or heard, but she cannot fully describe the entire experience. Even her mother may not be able to recall the exact experience of giving birth. She can speak about her own experience, but if the listener has never experienced childbirth, they cannot truly understand how the mother feels. The eternal happiness of enlightenment is similar. Only those who have gone through the stages of practice and have experienced it themselves can truly understand it. For example, if the little girl asks her father, "Daddy, what is your relationship with mommy like?" The father might answer, "Sweetie, go out and play. I'll tell you later." Perhaps when the girl has grown up and is of marriageable age, the father will say to his daughter, "Long ago, you asked me what my relationship with your mother was like. Do you want to hear the answer now?" The daughter replies, "No, Dad, I already know the answer." The daughter has grown in understanding. She has come to know the answer herself. If an everyday experience like the relationship between a man and a woman is difficult to explain, imagine how much harder it is to comprehend the complete happiness of liberation from suffering. Currently, our minds are filled with thoughts, concepts, and biases, most of which stem from greed, hatred, and ignorance. Trying to understand the profound nature of complete happiness before we have eradicated negative states of mind is unrealistic. We can only rely on metaphors, parables, and scriptures recounted by enlightened beings and try to reason to gain some understanding. For example, a long time ago, there was a turtle living among a school of fish and other sea creatures. One day, the turtle disappeared. When the turtle returned, the fish asked where it had gone. "I went to the land," the turtle replied. They asked, "What is the water like on land?" The turtle answered, "There is no water on land." "Then how do you swim?" "I don't swim, I walk." "Walk? What do you mean by walk? And did you see many fish there?" When the turtle tried to explain, the fish skeptically said, "No water, no fish, you can't swim, and you say you walk. How can that be?" The turtle replied, "You can believe whatever you want. As for me, I'm going back to the land." With that, the turtle left. Just as the fish cannot comprehend the meaning of land, a person still full of defilements from greed, hatred, and ignorance cannot understand nirvana. To realize it, we must transform all negative mental states and personally experience enlightenment. Currently, the closest experience to the happiness of enlightenment is the serene state of mind that we occasionally achieve when we let go of our burdens for a moment, when the mind is just mind with nothing else in it. The understanding we gain through reasoning during such moments can be compared to walking through a desert, feeling tired and thirsty, and then finding a deep well with some water at the bottom but no bucket or rope around. However, we are too weak and exhausted to weave a bucket to draw the water. Because of this, even if we can see the water, we still cannot touch it, let alone drink it. Similarly, when the mind is temporarily freed from greed, hatred, and ignorance, we can sense the serenity of nirvana, but we may not necessarily have the means to reach it. Eradicating craving is like finding the rope of compassionate mind. Liberating the mind from anger is like attaching that rope to the bucket of loving kindness. The strength in our hands is akin to wisdom, the liberation from ignorance. When we can combine these three qualities, we have the means to ultimately taste the complete happiness of nirvana. This state of happiness cannot be described in words. Its only characteristic is purity. It is unconditioned, uncreated, and unconditional. Therefore, the only thing we can do is to talk about what this state does not have. There is no greed, attachment, or clinging to things, people, or the past. There is no anger, conflict, enmity, or lust. There is no delusion that perceives things as permanent, self-sufficient, or as having a soul or an inner self. Those who are still under the illusion that they are enjoying life as it is in a world of suffering might hear this description and say, "So enlightenment doesn't sound that great. I'm not sure I want to reach that state. Are there houses there? What about families, schools, health insurance, hospitals, roads, and so on?" These questions have been posed to me. The answer has to be no. Those who cling to life and the endless cycle of rebirths do not have the clarity of mind to desire the state of complete purity. They do not understand the Buddha's first noble truth, that suffering is unavoidable, or his second noble truth, that the more we crave, the more we suffer. Without right view about these basic truths, they cannot comprehend the Buddha's third noble truth, that suffering will end when we eradicate all craving and attachment. There may be doubts about whether wanting to achieve enlightenment and escape the endless cycle of rebirth is acceptable. The answer is yes. This is a wholesome desire, known as the desire to be without desire. The fourth noble truth, the path. The fourth noble truth of the Buddha is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. The eightfold path, right path, brings happiness and peace to those who practice it. We will explore each step in detail later, but for now, let's take an overview. 1. Right view. This requires us to understand good actions based on cause and effect and the Four Noble Truths, and to see if they align with the Buddha's teachings in general. 2. Right intention. This directs us towards three positive intentions: generosity or renunciation, loving kindness, and compassion. 3. Right speech. This teaches us how to speak the truth and avoid harsh, malicious, or frivolous speech to help us progress on the path. 4. Right action. This provides principles for ethical living, especially avoiding killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants. 5. Right livelihood. This explains why choosing a suitable job or career is important for spiritual practice and how to address ethical questions in business. 6. Right effort. This outlines 4 steps we can follow to advance our practice: preventing negative mental states, overcoming negative mental states, cultivating positive mental states, and maintaining positive mental states. 7. Right mindfulness. This involves the practice of mindfulness meditation, especially cultivating mindfulness of the body, feelings, mind, and phenomena. 8. Right concentration. This refers to the 4 stages of deep meditation that we can achieve in meditation practice. These 8 steps, the Noble Eightfold Path, are not just an interesting list of thoughts taught by the Buddha. They are our best hope for attaining enlightenment. If these 8 steps are something you quickly read through and then set aside, you have not grasped their importance. There is no teaching in the Buddha's doctrine more profound and significant. In fact, these 8 steps constitute the very essence of the Buddha's teachings. The 8 steps are often depicted as a wheel, the wheel of wisdom, as opposed to the wheel of endless cyclic existence. Wisdom halts the spinning wheel of samsara. The spokes on the wheel of wisdom are the 8 steps on the Buddha's path. The hub of the wheel is the combination of compassion and wisdom. Conversely, the spokes on the wheel of samsara are the countless lifetimes we have endured, leading us to realms of suffering. The hub of that wheel is the combination of greed, hatred, and ignorance. Both wheels are constantly in motion. We see all around us the unending cycle of birth and death. Plants, animals, and humans are continually being born and dying. However, the movement of the wheel of wisdom can be more difficult to perceive, though it is ever present. All around us, people are practicing the path to the Buddha's happiness. This wheel moves because of the strong practice of spirituality, always active and turning. The circular shape of both wheels symbolizes completeness. The wheel of samsara is an absolutely closed system, a perfect system for perpetuating suffering. Meanwhile, the circular shape of the wheel of wisdom symbolizes that the Noble Eightfold Path is complete and perfect. To liberate yourself from suffering, you need to practice every aspect of the wheel of wisdom. Simply reading about the 8 steps of the wheel, the Noble Eightfold Path, will not make you happy. If you try to keep a bicycle wheel standing still, it will fall. However, if you keep the wheel spinning by riding the bike, the wheel will stay upright as long as the movement continues. To benefit you, the wheel of wisdom must also be set in motion through daily practice. Conclusion: people suffer not because of a lack of material possessions, wealth, or fame, but because of ignorance. Ignorance prevents people from understanding the true nature of life. Buddhism provides a path, an escape route, and the means to unlock the treasure of one's own wisdom. The Buddha defined ignorance as not knowing suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. This, O bhikkhus, is called ignorance. Samyutta Nikaya Vi. Conversely, wisdom is the opposite of ignorance. From the perspective of wisdom, the interdependent relationship of the Four Noble Truths is clearly revealed. Seeing one truth is seeing the entirety of truth. The Buddha taught, whoever sees suffering also sees the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Whoever sees the origin of suffering also sees suffering, sees the cessation of suffering, and sees the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Whoever sees the cessation of suffering also sees suffering, the origin of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Whoever sees the path leading to the cessation of suffering also sees suffering, the origin of suffering, and the cessation of suffering. Samyutta Nikaya. This correct understanding is right view, which plays a crucial role in the practice of the Four Noble Truths. In other words, right view is the foremost of all practices. This clear understanding is also called the vision of the path. The doctrine of the Four Noble Truths is both a means and an end. It is a complete teaching full of humanistic values that brings confidence and vitality to people and society, both in ancient times and in the modern era. The characteristic of the Four Noble Truths is the middle path, which avoids the extremes of indulgence in sensual pleasures and self-mortification. The doctrine of the Four Noble Truths encompasses all the teachings of the Buddha. It can be practiced by both monastics and lay people. Anyone can cultivate it and taste the flavor of liberation, meeting the need to end personal suffering and transform society.